Okay, everybody, today we're going to be utilizing our vehicle trainer, one of them, and I'm going to do a demonstration on a serpentine belt inspection and replacement procedure. A couple things that I want to talk about as I go through it. First, I'm going to be using the trainer simply because it's a lot easier to film this without the sheet metal of the vehicle around it. I just get a much better picture. So, the vehicle that we're working on is a 1998 Chevrolet Astrovan. 4.3 liter engine. So let's go ahead and I'm going to bring you in close just so I can give you a couple shots. First thing you probably want to get, okay, is over here on the computer, is I have my serpentine belt routing. I pulled that up on Mitchell On Demand or On Demand 5. Soon you guys will be getting your laptop so you can bring it right with you to the vehicle like I did. Okay, whenever I'm doing a vehicle inspection, I want to look at the belt, make sure that it's not, there's no glaze on here. This one looks pretty good. Keeping in mind that this is a trainer vehicle, never really goes outside, it doesn't run, so the belt really is never going to wear. Other things that I want to look at is I'm going to kind of get in here and turn this belt inside out. Hopefully you can get a good look at that. And what I'm looking for are any cracks that might be in these ribs. Because the belt's rubber, it's going to dry rot over time. Any cracks, we would want to recommend this belt for replacement. Any glazing on the outside here also would be an indicator that the belt would be due for replacement. Something that I look for whenever I'm checking out belts or any kind of part is right there on that serpentine belt. You can see it has a part number, GM, and the number is following it. And what that tells me is that this belt is OE, original equipment. And of course, being the vehicle is a 98, it's been on there a long time, that alone would get me to make a recommendation for serpentine belt replacement. Well, why do they call it a serpentine belt? Well, if you look at the picture on that I have up here on my computer, you can see that the belt, it's serpentines all the way around all of these pulleys, okay? And each one of these pulleys are labeled what it does. Okay, for example, air conditioning, power steering, crankshaft at the bottom, water pump, the tensioner, and your alternator or generator. And lastly, you have your idler pulley up there. If you don't have access to the internet, which you guys do, but if you don't, before I take the belt off, what I'll do is you can simply take a piece of paper and draw a little picture of it. Okay, that might be easier because once you pull these belts off, it sometimes can be a process if you don't have a diagram putting it back together. You can make the job take a lot longer than what it really should. So on this one, I believe labor time calls for about 3/10, which is 15 minutes to replace it. Just to point those components out, again, alternators on top. We have our air conditioning compressor. Down below right there, we have our power steering pump. Our water pump is right there behind the fan. Okay. And way down below, I know it's difficult to see that pulley down beneath the power steering pump pulley. It's going to be our crankshaft. And then we get to this one right here, which is our automatic tensioner right there. It is spring-loaded, and that's what keeps tension on the belt. And last but not least, we have this guy up here, which is our idler pulley. Okay, a lot of the times beginners make a mistake when they go to take these belts off, and they'll just pull the bolt out of the idler pulley and take the whole pulley itself off, and that's not something that we want to do. Okay, before we take the belt off, we're going to go ahead and take a peek at some of the tools that I have set out here for you guys, okay, just to look at. And I brought over with me on my roll cart, just so it's a little bit easier. Have cart is going to travel. And what I have is an arrangement of some of the things that you should probably bring over with you. Starting with first, I brought over an old V-belt. Okay, and there's only two types of belts that we work with. Anything really 1995 and newer is going to have a serpentine belt on it, and that's what I just showed you over there. One belt drives everything. Okay. Before that, we used to have what's called a V-belt. All manufacturers used to put these on. And instead of having one belt that drives everything, each individual component, the ones that I just went over with you, alternator, power steering, water pump, etc., they would have their own individual belt. And if you look at it, this is a V-belt. And if you look at it from the inside, it actually, well, kind of does resemble a V. Okay, so hence V-belt. And if you do run into these, and you might at some point, you're going to want to inspect these the same way, kind of peel them around, make sure that there is no any cracks inside of here, any glazing on the outside. A couple points that you just want to look for when inspecting V-belts, but really we don't run into them too frequently. They don't put them on cars much anymore. I'll see a few isolated applications, but other than that, we're pretty much all serpentine belt. Something that we really don't want to use is a Prybar whenever we're replacing a serpentine belt. It has an automatic tensioner. Each one of those tensioners will have a certain tool that you can use to move that automatic tensioner. Prybar is not a tool that we want to use. Here's what we, this is a specialty tool, and what it is used for is, you can see how it's angled. What it'll do is it'll fit into certain places on a specific vehicle. Now, years ago, most technicians used to probably have about 10 or 12 of these in their toolbox, and depending on the car you were working on, you would go ahead and grab that special tool. But we really don't need those too much anymore. We're going to kind of stick with our ratchets for this exercise. In most cars, that's really all you need. Last thing that I have here is a belt hook tool. And it's pretty long, and on the end of it, it just has a C on it. And what this does is, when you're working on the vehicle, and not a trainer like I am, you could go ahead and use this tool to grab hold of the belt and maybe, help loop it around a pulley in those really hard to reach spots. Okay, I don't think I'm going to need this for this one. However, something good that you guys ought to consider having in your toolbox. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through replacing the serpentine belt on this on our trainer here. Get you set up for the best shot that I can. And of course, I already have my printout or my diagram of the serpentine belt routing. And what I'm going to pick here is I'm going to pick my 3/8 drive ratchet. And I'm going to bring you down in here a little bit closer just to show you how this works. And hopefully I don't drop the camera. But if we look at that automatic tensioner, or spring-loaded tensioner, you'll notice that right down on the bottom of it, it does have a square on it. Okay, and that's where your ratchet is going to fit in. And once I have the ratchet in, all I have to do is move that ratchet, and you'll notice that the tensioner just comes away from the belt. Really nice. Okay, so let me go ahead, and I'm going to have to set the camera down here for a few minutes while I go ahead and do this task. Okay, I think that should be pretty good right there. I'll go ahead and push my tensioner down. I'll go ahead and I'm going to remove the belt from the idler pulley. There really is no specific way here. It's kind of whatever is going to be easiest for you, the technician. Once I have that belt released, okay, from my tensioner, I'll go ahead and just simply remove it from around the rest of the pulleys. And I always try at least to remember how it came off, because remember, it's a little bit easier when you have to put it back on. And of course, there you have it. There is your serpentine belt. Fairly simple job. There's not a lot to it. But again, these can get extremely aggravating if you don't stay on top of it. So we'll say that we have our new belt, and I'll go ahead and I'll reinstall it. Again, I have my picture up there. And if I remember right, I think I do, it went around the crankshaft first. I'm going to loop it around there. Then from there it went around my water pump. In from the water pump it went down my power steering. And as I'm going, I'm just kind of keeping tension on it so it doesn't slip off. From my power steering it went up and over my air conditioning compressor. And then it went around my tensioner. And of course, I'll go over here and I'll get my ratchet so that I can go ahead and move my tensioner and get the belt back installed. Okay. So I'll go ahead and put my ratchet back in that provided square on the automatic tensioner and just simply push it down. And if all goes well, and I always hope that it does, the belt should go right back on there, which it did. And of course, we're not quite through yet. What we would do when we're completed with the task is I always double check, look and make sure that our alignment is proper. It's fitting in all of our pulleys correctly. And I'll always start the vehicle. I'll start it and run it for maybe a couple moments, maybe a minute, that's it. Shut it off, come back out, and I want to observe my belt, just take a really close look, make sure that all of those ribs on that serpentine belt are fitting in properly on all of my pulleys. The last point that I want to make with serpentine belt replacement is, aside from, or in addition rather, to visually inspecting the belt for any glazing and of course any cracks that are in the ribs of that serpentine belt. I already covered the OE part number with you guys. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to try to set this here the best I can, and we're going to hope that it doesn't fall, although it might. I think we're pretty good. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and move that tensioner, and all you have to do that is grab the belt at any point, and hopefully you can see that tensioner moving. I think you can. And what I'm doing there is I'm just verifying the tensioner's operation. And in order to do that, I don't have to take it off the car. I could leave it on the vehicle, because I'll tell you, a few times before taking these belts off, that tensioner could be bad. If it's not tight enough, we're not giving the proper tension to all of our pulleys. And of course, we could run into an undercharging condition, especially with the alternator, or maybe it's not tight enough to drive the water pump, and now the vehicle overheats. So what I like to do before I pull that belt off, and I probably should have done it, is exercise that tensioner by pulling on that belt anywhere, and just make sure that it moves. And of course, it goes back to where it started, and we have good tension on that belt. It should be nice and tight. Okay? Well, that's it for this video on serpentine belts. I hope you find this helpful.